you probably have life insurance.
Yeah.
You have medical insurance. Why do you take out accident insurance? You take it out for the rainy day.
Yeah.
But we know that aging, none of us are beating it. No one's putting the investment into this health. We're very prepared to be reactive when the shit hits the fan. I don't come from a medical family. Grew up in South Africa during the Apartheid years. My dad was a professional cricket player, first non-white South African who made it into the cricket team, played internationally. My childhood was a little bit unusual. We spent 6 months of the year, the cricket season, in the UK. And then we would be brought back to South Africa and you would have all these restrictions that were imposed. We came back with these full Scottish accents.
Crazy.
And the first school that we went to was a school that was set up for coloured children. My dad got the call from the school to say, we don't think this is going to work out. From a very young age, there was this deep desire and I would say calling. I knew I needed to do something different. So I ended up working at the local police station during high school, observing postmortems that were being done on unnatural deaths. I'm this 16-year-old student. I spent my time in palliative care, and that was driven by working in the TB, HIV, co-infected space that I was in. The time that I spent there was pretty early in my career, and it fundamentally shifted the way I thought about life, about medicine. I've always wanted to do something that is hugely impactful and meaningful, not just for me, but for whoever's sitting on the other side of me as well. At the moment, I work in a health optimization space at Matter. I'm the director of operations and I work as a health coach as well. What you need to do to improve your health, build that capacity so that you're aging better, takes
Dr. Shireen Henry, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Well, listen, a lot better now that you're here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get started, I want to say how we first met. So
Crazy story, right?
Crazy story.
Right.
So when you see the outtakes, you might just say, listen, Paul Gautam, I don't want this in the vlog. So we met at Paul Foster and his lovely wife's 9D breathwork event, which is the first time you and I had been.
Yes.
Just pick up from there, and what's your memory of that event?
Oh, wow. So I will say I went with a friend.
Did you know Paul before?
I didn't know Paul, but I'd heard about him because one of our co-founders is a good friend of Paul's. And my colleague that I went with is a good friend as well.
Okay.
And so she had invited me to this 9D breathwork session. And I will say I was skeptical, to say the least. Now, I'm all for breathwork. I believe in it deeply.
Yeah.
But I had seen video footage of the way individuals had reacted in these sessions.
Yeah.
And to be honest, my brain was like, oh, that's put on.
Yeah, it's not real.
It's not real. So I went in skeptical, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna have an open mind. Let's just see how this goes. And before we went to the session, I had told Ian that I was going, one of our co-founders, and he's big in the breathwork space.
Okay.
And he said to me, Shireen, and he knows a little bit about my past, and he said, just giving you a heads up that for some people during these sessions, you may have some sediment coming up, is how he put it, right?
I love that description. He's very apt.
And I was like, okay. And I thought, well, yeah, that's not really going to happen to me, because at that point, I thought I'd been in therapy for years. I've gone through trauma counseling. I've dealt with my shit. I'm going to be okay, but I'm there to experience it. And I can't. It's hard to describe to people who haven't been through it.
Yeah.
Because I think when you go through it, then it's like a aha moment at the end.
Well, I'll share this with you. I've not seen the footage yet. Gautam is pulling it together. So at the end, he says you should scream.
Yes.
Right? And there were different levels of screaming, but there were 15 or 18 of us there. but unequivocally, you were the loudest. Yours was the most guttural. And it was, from what you said, it was like I was shouting, "Ah!" And I was thanking my kids and my wife or whatever. But yours was, it was from a very deep place in your heart. It was gut wrenching.
Yeah.
So when you watch that back, you might say, Paul, I don't know if I want you to release that.
But like in the moment, you're so removed from everything around you, right?
You really are.
And so it felt like I was releasing the scream, but that only I was hearing it. And it felt so soft in my head.
Because we're wearing earphones and there's music playing, it's very powerful, and we're in eye mask. So you're gone, right? And for a long period of time. And with the breath work, which I was really struggling with the breathing.
Yeah.
I don't think I got it right because he kept coming back to it. So I got the stomach right, but not the chest right. And at some point I'm thinking, what am I doing? But I found it very spiritual.
Yeah.
I felt very close to my mum and dad, which was really weird, right? And I was thinking about them because you're listening to this man talking and it's taking you into different places. I can't advocate it enough. I'd love to bring my wife, but I think I told you, and I told Paul, I'm not going to go when my wife is there. He goes, why? I said, I didn't say sediment. I said she got a lot of residual hate towards me. Over 23 years.
I'm not sure how this is going to play out.
She's going to wake up, I'm going to get you, bastard, and then you're in trouble. Now, look, before we turn back the pages of time, can you give a quick intro as to who you are, and then we're going to delve into your story.
All right. So I'm Shireen Henry, a South African-trained medical doctor. Did my medical degree in South Africa. I guess I could, to a certain extent, be regarded as like a third culture kid. My parents are South African. Mm-hmm. I come from a sporting family. My dad was a professional cricket player. Grew up in South Africa during the Apartheid years. So what that meant was South Africa was banned from international sport. So that is what ended up being the driver for us to. My dad was recruited, I would say, to the UK to play cricket. That's where, so I ended up being born in Scotland.
Oh, were you?
Yes.
I didn't know that, in Scotland.
Yeah.
Where in Scotland?
So in Glasgow.
Wow. You've got such a rich history.
Yeah. So that's what took us out of South Africa. And my childhood, I would say, was a little bit unusual in the sense that we spent 6 months of the year, the cricket season, in the UK. And the other 6 months we would be back in South Africa. And during the apartheid years, that came with some challenges because you didn't have that blatant racism in the UK at the time. Yeah. And then we would be brought back to South Africa and you would have all these restrictions that were imposed. And we couldn't, as you know, at a young age, you don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to you because you're like, well, in the UK, we're living in this, multicultural neighborhood. Yeah. We were probably a handful of Indian and mixed race families. Yeah. The majority of our neighbors were Caucasian. Yeah. And then we're back in South Africa and we're living in a neighborhood that's only meant for colored people. And that's what I'm defined or classified as.
Well, let's give a shout out to your dad because, he wasn't just a regular cricketer. He was the first black South African cricket player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is amazing, right?
So after the apartheid bans were lifted, South Africa was allowed to play international sport again. And then he was the first non-white South African who made it into the cricket team, played internationally. But I think he made his debut at the age of 40. So he was quite seasoned by that time.
That's amazing.
And then carried on for a couple of years. So he lives and breathes cricket. We grew up with sport surrounding.
It's in your DNA.
Everything in the household.
And what happened with your mum? Because was she a trailing spouse?
She was. Yeah. So they got married. My dad was 29. My mum was 19. Okay. And after the marriage, he whisked her off to the UK, and so that's what she did.
So after Glasgow, where did you go after that?
So my parents were sort of in England, depending on the club that my dad was playing with or working with at the time. But mainly Glasgow, Edinburgh as well.
Okay.
And then from there, when in 1994, 92, 94, he made the decision to go back to South Africa.
Okay.
Because he wanted to give back to the underprivileged communities and kind of grow cricket from the grassroots level up.
So noble.
My mum didn't like it at the time. You know, she
wanted to stay put.
Yeah, she wanted to stay put. But he was like, no, I have to do this. And so that's what ended up bringing the family back to South Africa.
How old were you?
9, 10 at the time.
Do you remember the Scotland years?
We do.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
You had a great time?
Great time. Just a whole different living experience.
Yeah. But as a kid, you just adapt, right? You don't necessarily know the difference and how unusual it is.
Yeah.
Because 6 months and 6 months got to be tough.
It is.
Like living two different lives almost.
It is. It is. And then with that level of change that you're experiencing when you come back and then going again, was certainly things that my sister and I had to get used to, because we came back. And in the coloured community where we stayed in Stellenbosch, the majority, my dad is Afrikaans speaking, my mum is English, but the majority of the coloured population was Afrikaans speaking. And we didn't speak Afrikaans. We came back with these full Scottish accents.
Crazy.
And the first school that we went to was a school that was set up for coloured children, and they only spoke Afrikaans. And my sister and I went there for, I think it was like a week. And then my dad got the call from the school to say, yeah, we don't think this is going to work out. You're going to have to, pull your kids from the school because the teachers don't have any idea what they're saying.
Jeez. So what happened?
So we ended up being pulled out for a period of time. And then we went back to Scotland. And of course, we were in school.
So then you stayed in Scotland after that?
No. So what ended up happening was my dad moved the family back. So we completed our primary school years in South Africa, in Stellenbosch, went to high school, and then from there I went to medical school. And then after that...
How's your Scottish accent?
I don't think I have one.
Can you put one out? after a couple of drinks, does it come out?
I don't drink, but yeah.
But the Scottish people, because even though I grew up in London, my father was Irish, and there's a big difference between the English and Irish. And if you go to Scotland, Ireland, or Wales, people are just different. Yes, there's racism at times. I think that's changing now. But I'll give an example. I was in Stirling on my own, and I went to a bar, and just on my own for a drink, and I wasn't allowed to buy a drink all night. I'm not joking. I was there. I was young at the time, and I just thought it was such an amazing time. So I went back years ago, about 8 years ago, for my friend's 40th birthday, and I don't know why my friends in the UK are like this. I said, who wants to go away for a weekend? Because I was in town and no one wanted to go away, or they got kids, and I don't know why having kids stops you from doing things. It shouldn't, right?
It shouldn't.
And so I said, oh, fuck it, I'm going to go to Scotland on my own. So I got the train to Edinburgh, and then I rented a car, and I went back to Stirling. I went to all the places where they filmed, like Harry Potter.
Nice.
It Glenfinnan and the bridge where they filmed the train scene, and I just absolutely love it there. Right. So my thing was, when I was there, I'm going to have a battered sausage, a tin of iron brew, and then
iron brew is the best.
And just enjoy it, right? Because it was cold.
Yeah.
By the way, it was summer, but it was still cold, right? Fish and chips, and I just enjoy it. But if you think a little bit about how people are, I just find that the Scottish people are so friendly.
100%. I think that's what drew my parents, why they love Scotland so much.
Yeah.
And we still have a huge family friend base. My dad actually is now the president of Scottish cricket.
Really?
Yeah, so he's...
but you still live in South Africa?
Yes, so he goes over for the cricket season now. But
Wowza.
There's just this affinity to the Scottish people that we have. And it comes down to that kindness as well. And I think coming from the experiences that my dad and my mum went through during the Apartheid years and growing up and the challenges with that, and then getting into this environment where people are just kind to you, and there's genuine friendships and people are willing to help you. it definitely, it hit deep for them.
This is because I know zero about cricket. I was at a dinner and there was someone next to me and I was talking to him and I said, hey, how you doing? You know me, I was just talking, getting along with him. I tend not to ask people what they do for a living, right? Because it's almost like that almost feels transactional. And at the end of it, someone said to me, know who that is? I said, no. He goes, that's Brian Lara. And I said, who's Brian Lara? And then I looked him up and I said, wow. And I thought he probably enjoyed that conversation.
Because you had no idea.
Yeah. And I didn't ask him a word and it was just a really nice conversation. And I read that, I thought, wowzer. But ignorance is bliss sometimes.
It is, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what was it like? How was Nelson Mandela viewed, right? From your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, he's a hero in South Africa, right? I think everything that he stood for, that he believed in, that he fought for, it became an inspiration to
truly
to many people across races.
Yeah.
And I think again it comes down to that quietness as well. I mean, kindness, should I say?
Yeah, but
right?
no, but quietness as well.
He had a very soft way of speaking.
Yeah. He was a boxer.
Yes.
So he had that background, right? And he's got to be one of the most remarkable men that's ever, walked the planet. Yeah. Truly.
And I remember when I went to visit Robben Island for the first time.
Did you go? Wow.
I did.
What was it like?
It was eye-opening, you walk into the cell and you think, wow, he spent so many years there, and yet he used that time to educate himself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how he ended up becoming a lawyer, right?
Well, you're 27, Gautam? He was in prison, I think 26, 27 years.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, massive respect for Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's so interesting. So then what took you along the journey to becoming a doctor? Where did it even begin?
So I don't come from a medical family at all. Actually, all my aunts and uncles are in education. And that was also a historical thing, because during the apartheid years, there were only certain professions that colored black people could go into, generally speaking, right?
Yeah.
Most of it was education, or you became some sort of tradesman, a plumber, a carpenter. You were using your hands in some form. So my dad always knew that he wanted to play cricket, to the disappointment of his parents to some degree,
really?
Right? Because they were like, well, this isn't a career.
It's not going to pay.
Like, how are you going to pay the bills?
Yeah.
But from a very young age, and I can't pinpoint an exact moment, but there was this deep desire, and I would say calling, that this was the route that I wanted to be on.
How old were you roughly?
I would say probably from the age of 5, 6.
Wow. And
it
carried through.
It
That's
was
amazing.
Always something that I knew I wanted to do. Now, I had an interest as I got older.
Yeah.
This
didn't start from playing doctors and nurses with your male best
I
friend,
think...
did it? Because I remember one of I was 5 and my friend Kate, she goes, let's play doctors and nurses. I go, what is that? You know what I mean? I thought it was that game, when you pick up
the surgery.
Did you ever have that?
I didn't have that.
I never had it, but I got it
that.
for my kids because we couldn't afford it as a family. But it's such a cool game.
It is a cool game.
Yeah.
It is a cool game.
So it didn't start there.
We definitely played, the whole... I'm going to be the mother and the father.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to play the doctor,
okay.
In that scenario.
Love it.
But it was from a very young age that I knew that this was what I wanted to do. And over time, that just sort of it was strengthened through various experiences as well. And then it got to a point where I needed to decide, which way to go. And it was either going to be law or medicine. I didn't, going through high school, I wasn't a straight A student. I played sport. I was, on the leadership of the school. prefect various cultural organizations, headed that up. I did debating.
Debating they never had it in my school. I think it's such a great subject to have.
It is. I think it builds not just your confidence, but your ability to think and argue and hear both sides of the story.
Yeah.
Or the argument,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're given a scenario where you don't actually agree with this, but you've got to find the arguments that are going to resonate and make sense, and that's logical. I think it's a really great way to teach you public speaking skills and critical logical
my
thinking.
wife's a debater, and she's a lawyer, right? She's got a PhD in law. So I've been debating with her for 23 years. I've yet to win an argument. I'll get there.
No surprising. There's always hope. There's always hope.
One day,
There's
maybe she'll let me win one.
Yeah, there's always hope.
So so when did you decide what you were going to do at university and where you were going to go? What were your options?
So I applied to 3 different medical schools. I always knew this was what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And however, I knew that I wasn't a straight A student. And there were 2 disadvantages that I was sitting with at the time. One was the color of my skin, because being colored and coming from a historical, so-called disadvantaged population, there weren't many medical students of color that were getting into university. The times were changing, but it still was nowhere near the Caucasian student population. And that goes down to a systemic issue of education, access to resources, things like that. And the other was not being a full straight A student. So I knew I needed to do something different so that if that time came where I needed to motivate why I belonged in medical school, I had something that I could show beyond just being on the different societies and being a prefect, etc., captain of the hockey team. So I ended up finding myself doing, through my mum's friend, working at the local police station during high school.
You must have seen some stuff.
Observing postmortems that were being done on unnatural deaths.
Wowza.
And that was the first time that I had come sort of face to face. Like,
that's heavy.
It is, pretty morbid. But an amazing experience because it was fascinating. And it was, the professor that was doing the postmortems at the time was a great teacher as well. So it was a very surreal moment because I'm this 16-year-old student who's now in this very cold clinical room with silver tables and, dead bodies essentially that are being investigated for their unnatural cause of death.
Yeah.
And he's explaining the science. And in that moment, you think to yourself, wow, this is what it comes to.
Yeah.
Like, what is the journey that gets you to this moment? And so, did it?
And a lot of people, they can't understand it because a lot of people, they've only seen a dead body maybe when they go to a funeral and the body's embalmed, right? And I remember there's 2 scenes that you're talking about. Now there's TV, movies all the time. You see people, in the mortuary.
Yeah.
But I remember watching, my abiding memory was Silence of the Lambs. And they looking at a body, but it's decomposed because it's been in the water for a long time.
Yeah.
So you see bits of the body, but it probably smells.
Yeah.
And these guys, I think they were putting Vicks up their nose.
Yeah.
And why I remember that was years later, I had to fix a storage pipe with my father, and because he built his own well and a storage system at my house in Ireland, or their house, and I went and I did it. I put Vicks up my nose, I wore a mask, and then I went down there, and then he was angry with me because I couldn't fix something. I wasn't very strong. I wasn't as strong as he was. So he went down, and he didn't do any of that, and the smell was so bad. My dad had dentures, and he vomited, and his dentures came out. And I was thinking, yes, I got him. Anyway, sorry, side note. But so when you were there, then when did you think, okay, this is really what I'm thinking of doing?
The science of it all was fascinating for me.
It grabbed you.
And I loved biology was my favorite subject in school.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of like the real life version of it all unfolding as well. And I remember thinking, wow, although being a forensic pathologist is a pretty morbid profession, but this is how he's giving the dignity back to this person that is in front of him right now, because he's trying to find out how they died, who caused it, etc.
And so important for the families.
Absolutely. So that became it inspired me even further, because now I was able to, the science was now even more exciting. And then it got to a point where I needed to apply to medical school. And I did, got rejected outright. And I knew that was the risk, because all over the world, medical school, it's a competitive field, right? And at the time, the focus was also very much around your academics. Now things have pivoted to trying to find more well-rounded individuals, because, we realize that it takes more than just, whether you're scoring A's in all your subjects. Like, what really makes a good doctor? What really makes a good healthcare professional that is able to relate to another human being and be there in their times of distress, but have the knowledge and critical thinking skills and, problem solving skills to be able to make a diagnosis, right? But at the time, your academics was the biggest factor. So I got rejected, and that was devastating, absolutely devastating. I didn't have a plan B, because this is all I wanted to do. My mum was working at the university at the time, one of the universities that I applied for at Stellenbosch. And the conversation then went to, okay, well, what are my options now? And it was discussed, okay, well, you can go and do another degree, and then you can try and come back. And I was like, no, that's not what I want. This is what I want. And she said, okay, well, if this is really what you want to do, then you're going to have to fight for it. And the only way for you to do that is to appeal the process.
Wow.
So I put in my appeal application. And I was given the opportunity then to go and state my case in front of this panel.
Really? Wow.
Of why me? And again, it was, well, if I don't get in, then what, right? But I wasn't going to allow myself to think about that option.
Not dwell on that
either.
Yeah.
And I think this is where growing up in a sporting family sort of like changes your mindset
100%.
around how you approach hardships and failures, right? Like you have to get up and you've got to keep going. And if this is what you want, then you've got to be fighting for it, right?
Yeah.
And so from a young age, those were the discussions, the dinner table discussions were around mindset. I mean, the first book that my dad ever gave me, and I think I was in the last part of primary school and starting high school.
What was it?
Was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so...
Well, he was enlightened, because, that's something a man of his generation, not many men will be reading that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, he took a deep interest into
psychology,
training of the
big.
mind, and with his own cricket players, your mindset was key.
It's everything.
It's everything, yeah. Visualization, all of those things played a role. And so I had that growing up, and I knew, okay, well, this is what I want, so I'm going to have to give it my all. And if it's not meant to be, then it's not meant to be. So I went, appealed the process, appeared in front of this panel, and you have to state your case, I said, look, I'm not you can see my marks. I'm not a full A student. And I had A's and I had B's, but, they're looking for the best academic performers because at the time, that is what's going to make you a good doctor.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I have all these other qualities. This is a calling for me. It's something that I'm here to fight for. But
Powerful.
the only way that I can do that is if I'm given the opportunity. I'm aware of the fact that I'm colored, that there aren't many colored medical students in comparison to the white population. But the other parts of my high school, being part of the first hockey team, being the captain, holding all these winning these debate awards and other cultural activities that I was doing, the postmortem stuff, which is what I wove into my story of like, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I see myself doing.
And I can see that track record.
Yeah. Left the panel interview not knowing how this was going to turn out.
So you weren't sure when you left?
No. They had to deliberate. So that week of waiting was agonizing.
I bet.
Because I had and I think if I remember correctly, we were like a week and a half out of university starting.
Wow, so it was upon you.
Yeah, and in South Africa, the academic years run from January to December.
Okay.
So it was literally 2 weeks out from university starting, had no backup plan. And yeah, then you just have to have the faith that what you're doing is going to work out for you. And a week later, I got the call to come back down, and my mum went with me. And, the lady gave me the information. So we've made a decision. We're going to accept your appeal.
Wow.
But don't mess this up.
Yeah.
And that is something like those words stayed with me.
Yeah.
Throughout medical school.
Yeah.
Like, you can't fuck this up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. Was it tough? 100%.
Yeah.
Were there ups and downs? For sure. But it came down to, I'm here, I had to fight for this position.
I love it.
This is what I need to do.
All in.
Yeah.
All in. Good for you. There's such a strong story there because I think a lot of people give up at the first hurdle.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people don't even try because they think they're going to fail.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? I love that grit, that determination.
And I think it's also...
How did you react afterwards when he came out? Did you go...
It was
yes,
almost this disbelief in a way as well, like surreal.
You probably valued it because if you had just been accepted, your whole approach might have been different going in. I'm not saying you would have been complacent, but do you know what I mean? It meant that much more.
But now you're not taking it for granted as well. I think that is what it teaches you.
Yes.
Is being able to be appreciative of the journey that you're on, because it wasn't just handed to you on a silver platter.
Yeah.
And that was a very early lesson in life. And I think my parents, in a way, what I'm grateful for is they didn't want to, even though my dad was this public figure in South Africa and well known, he refused to just give everything to us. He was like, well, the only way you're going to appreciate something is if you work for it.
Earn it. Love it.
And so, yeah, we were delivering newspapers in primary school, 5 a.m. in the morning before school started, because he was like, you're going to work for...
That graft is there.
Because you need to understand and appreciate the value of money and what you're getting and what you're... Yeah.
That's the biggest thing because, I grew up comfortable until I was at 14 and my dad had a stroke. Then he couldn't work.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and then everything changed. At 17, I had to start working full time. So I had always helped my father, because he was a builder. And when I say it was work, it was real work at a young age, like hard. You'd have to be with him. And at 17, my mum came upstairs on a Friday night. I was doing my homework. I was very studious, struggled at school, but always gave it everything. My favorite saying is, how I do anything is how I do everything, all in.
Yeah.
And she said, darling, you need to get a job on Monday. and you might have to drop out of college for now. And I was like, where's this coming from? And she said, we can't afford to pay the mortgage. And you've got to get a job that's going to pay us at the end of the week. Right. So, and my mum was she had tears in her eyes, and my mum's she was a cast iron bitch. She was fucking tough, wonderful woman, lovely woman, but she always held it together.
Yeah.
And that was fear in her eyes. Like, we're not going to be able to make the
Yeah.
mortgage payments. And she worked, right? She had 2 degrees. She worked, but she was a civil servant, so she didn't earn that much money. And I went to the local high street agency and I said, 6:30 in the morning, have you got anything starting today that will pay me at the end of the week? I'll take it, whatever it is. And I said, well, we've got a job as a toilet cleaner in a hospital. I said, yes, please, I'll take it. And they started laughing because I said, no one ever says yes, please, and thank you for a toilet job. And I said, look, it's noble work, no problem. So I did that for 3 months. And then how I fell into recruitment was I was handing in my timesheet, and the phones were ringing. And this guy called Richard Gordon was the manager there. He was there and he was busy, so I thought I'll help out. So I said, "Good morning, HMS Services. How can I help you?" And he goes, "What?" He covered the phone and goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" I said, "I'm answering the telephone, you idiot. What does it look like?" And then he goes, "You speak English?" Because all the toilet cleaners were foreign refugees.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, probably better than you do, mate." So he started laughing. What's your story? And but what I always say to my kids is, because they've grown up with a certain level of privilege.
Yeah.
And the reality is you can be from a poor family now, but you have things that we didn't have as kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone's got an iPad, a flat TV screen, a cell phone, whatever it is, right? And I always say hustle, grind, working hard. I don't care what you have to do. You know, even if you're doing something you don't want to do it, you're never going to use that. You're never going to do maths as a math. It doesn't matter. You've got to give it 100%.
Yeah.
And I do. The only thing my wife and I truly argue about is how we raise the kids. And she's an amazing mum, but I grew up without privilege, and I just think it toughens you up, and it makes you appreciative in a way that having money doesn't.
And there's life lessons there that no other situation is going to teach you.
Yeah.
And down the line, when you look back at it, it is going to be that that's what that was about.
Yeah.
That's what it taught me.
Yeah.
That's how I built my character and my ability to...
It's huge. We had a guest the other day, Gautam had just started working with me, and someone had used the toilet, and there were stains on the toilet.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, maybe you want to go and get..." He just started working. "Why don't you go and get your helper to clean up?" Well, I go, "What is it?" He goes, "There's shit stains on the toilet." I said, "Oh, hurry!" And then I cleaned it with and then he looked at me and I said, "Listen, if you're working with me, you've got to roll up your sleeves. You've got to get stuck in.
You got to get your hands
right?"
dirty.
And then you know, I don't know what you thought about that, but I just said, "Listen, I'm grateful every day that I'm no longer a toilet cleaner. I'm grateful that I don't work on a building site, although I love working on a building site. But never forget where you come from." Because I've had friends that have come from nothing and become relatively successful, and they become snobs.
Yeah.
And I flipping hate that. Never forget where you come from. Doesn't matter if you try to improve yourself, but you know that's visceral to me.
Yeah. And also just the knowing that it can all be stripped away from you
Like that.
in a split second, right?
It can. It truly can.
And then your whole world flips upside down.
How long was this degree?
6 years.
6 years. No joke.
No
So
joke.
what happened after that when you finished?
So finished, worked in South Africa for a while. You know, I was determined I was going to specialize. This is where I saw my life going. You know, very linear path, as we all seem to have when we're younger, right?
Of course. But things change.
And then, 100, yeah.
What happened?
So I got married, and then we had, you know, family issues that developed during the marriage, which ultimately led to my husband then needing to sort of take this period out of South Africa, to just get away, to get some perspective of what was happening. His parents were going through a divorce. And that was supposed to only be a 3-month stint for him. It ended up being extended. And that's then what became the motivator for, all right, well, maybe we should try this for a bit. Let's leave South Africa and we'll go to Indonesia for a little bit and we'll see how it goes. And at the time, what that meant for me was that I would take a back seat, because this was obviously for his career, and I would find work as it comes up. There was no plan. There was no so I carried on sort of studying, doing various other like postgraduate diplomas, and I'm big on education and learning. I believe everybody should be lifelong learners.
I love that.
And like expand your horizon.
Yeah.
The breadth of what you know just makes you a better human.
100%.
Allows you to be compassionate and empathize with other people and truly understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So we ended up, fast forward, spending 4 years in Indonesia.
Whereabouts?
So we spent 2 years in Sumatra, in the middle of the jungle.
Yeah.
And that in itself was a big learning.
Was he in oil and gas? Yeah.
Yeah. Big learning, because you're in this environment where the oil and gas companies have got these compounds where the employees and contractors live. So to give you some perspective, in Indonesia, there were about 10,000 employees and family members living in this compound. Gated community.
It's bigger than a lot of villages in Scotland and Ireland.
Protected.
Yeah.
You had an international school, you had a local school, you had a little commissary.
Amazing.
You had basketball courts, an 18-hole golf course.
Jeez, I didn't know that. All on site.
Everything's on site with all the...
Is it one employer or multiple?
So there's one main employer, and then they've got the the contractors, the service providers, working there. So you've got a mix of an expatriate population, and you've got predominantly local employees. But within the expatriate population, it creates a very different professional working environment, particularly where you're talking about like doctor-patient relationships. Because oftentimes, your GP, for example, that you see, you're not socializing with them in your social circles, right? There's that distinction.
Yeah.
And so when you're living in this environment where, it becomes a very tricky situation.
What were they farming? Like, was it palm oil?
No,
in Sumatra, oil.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to Medan?
I didn't go to Medan.
Okay.
Yeah, haven't visited Medan before.
Okay.
But yeah, so it was an interesting way to navigate that as well. And we were coming in, and at the time I worked sort of on a part-time basis as well for the same, as a contractor for the same oil and gas company. And we were pretty young, and everybody in the expatriate community either were school-going parents or had school-going kids, should I say, or they were the empty nesters. And so we were in this very few that didn't have kids at the time, weren't empty nesters. So it was navigating those complexities within that environment as well, where you're socially isolated in a sense because you're living in this compound, but at the same time, to maintain those professional boundaries, you can't be going to all, the weekend parties, for example. And you can't be, it's that sort of relationship management that you have to be acutely aware of.
Yeah, it's got to be tough.
Yeah, it was a learning experience for sure.
And you were there for 4 years?
2 years in Sumatra.
Okay.
And then 2 years, we then relocated to Balikpapan.
Okay.
And that was, very different. It was like more seaside. We weren't sort of in the Sumatran jungle.
My first employee, who used to work for my father-in-law, his dad was in oil and gas, and he lived in Balikpapan for years.
Oh.
Yeah, and he said most people have never even heard of it. And he said, this was back in the day, but he said, they would have a chauffeur driver for safety and security. And what was it like when you were there?
Same
thing.
Same. We lived in the gated community. You were given, company car. You had a driver to take you everywhere. You weren't permitted to drive yourself.
Yeah.
wasn't as strict, I would say, as Sumatra. Sumatra, we weren't allowed to leave the compound, and there were buses that was arranged.
It's crazy. It's just
X
different.
amount of times per week.
When people are hearing you describe this, they just can't. They won't be able to relate to it or think it's even real.
Yeah, and you had to apply to get your name on that bus list to go into the nearest town to go grocery shopping if you wanted to get something more than what was available.
Did you feel claustrophobic, like emotionally in some ways?
Over time, I think the isolation, for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe that was also because we were the medical professionals.
Yeah.
So it caused some isolation as well. I mean, I had a really great group of friends and women that I would golf with, and but you also had to maintain certain distances.
So hard.
It is hard. It is hard. But then one thing that taught me was, now you're in this environment, you have this commissary which has a limited supply of teas, and your coffee selection is now reduced, and it's all dependent on what stock is coming in, etc. And I remember after several months of being there, flying back home to South Africa, and I went into the grocery store with my mum. And I was so overwhelmed by the choices.
You smashed everything.
That was there. And I stood in front of the tea section.
Yeah.
And my mum had gone up and down the aisles, and she came back and she's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, have you ever thought about how much selection and how many options you actually have?
That's a good point.
And it took me back by realizing, again, in that moment, we take all of these things for granted.
100%.
And the only way that you ultimately get to appreciate it is when when you're deprived from it to a certain extent, right?
So valuable, that lesson.
Yeah. So it made a lot of people hoarders over the time, I won't lie.
I bet.
You'd go rations,
home. Right?
You go home. I mean, I flew home on several occasions with a whole lamb in my suitcase. Chopped up in my suitcase.
I bet.
But that was the life.
So then what happened after that? After Indonesia? Is that how you came to Singapore?
So after Indonesia, my husband got a direct role with the oil and gas company, and then we were sent to Singapore. We came to Singapore on an expatriate assignment.
Okay.
I was the trailing spouse, had a son in Indonesia, went home to give birth, came back. So he was 2 at the time that we moved here.
Okay.
And the intention there was moving to Singapore because of the work opportunity that had presented itself for my husband. And it was a great opportunity for him.
And Singapore would have felt, like a complete contrast now, given where you were coming from.
Oh, yeah. Like massively.
Night and day.
Massively.
Night and day.
Massively, for sure. But it was that experience, the adventure, the experience of it, the opportunities that could potentially
And when did you start? You did some further, that's why I was looking at my notes. So it says here, Royal College of Physicians in Ireland.
Yeah,
was that international?
Yeah, so over the years, I had continued to educate myself.
As you said, lifelong learning.
Yeah, various postgrad, and they span. And I remember at one point, I had this debate with my husband, and he was like, well, you need to decide, like, where are you going? Like, what direction are you going in? Because I was all over the place. I was, I had studied, I did a diploma in HIV medicine. So in South Africa, before I left, I was working in pediatrics.
Yeah.
Predominantly in the HIV, TB co-infected space.
So tough when children are born with it.
And that's a hard, and HIV with the stigma, and at the time we had the ARVs, and that was hugely powerful. Seeing people on death's door, 6 months later being able to function, hugely powerful. So my learning journey has spanned across occupational health, mental health, HIV medicine. I did pediatrics, occupational medicine, and then I found myself interested in sort of digital health when that presented itself later down the line as well. So a little bit all over the place, but I feel I did palliative care as well.
Yeah.
That ultimately...
That's an interesting one, because I find in like in Ireland, my mum and dad went through it. And I think they're kind in a way that, you know, it's because euthanasia is something that people don't like to talk about. But I just think it's ridiculous that, you know, you expect people, this is my personal opinion, there's been so much pain for long extended periods of time, and you're basically keeping them alive. Do you know what I mean? And my mum said to me, will you take me to Switzerland to help end my life? And I said, if I can, but I started doing the research, and I said, why didn't you ask my brother out of interest? She goes, well, I know you'll do it, right? And then I said, I will do it if I can, but you know, it's not straightforward. And I said, what I'd be doing is effectively illegal in the eyes of the law, because we really looked at it. And then when she went into palliative care, it was, I just think they were great. And it's something, it's such a hard job to do.
It is.
Right? But actually, I have to say, it's very meaningful.
Yeah.
To the families and to the person that's dying.
So I spent my time in palliative care, and that was driven by working in the TB, HIV co-infected space that I was in.
Yeah.
And palliative care, well, one, it's, I think, for a long time, a very misunderstood area of medicine.
Yeah.
Underappreciated, under-resourced.
Yeah.
But the time that I spent there was pretty early in my career, and it fundamentally shifted the way I thought about life, about medicine.
Yeah.
And
were you ready for it? Looking back, do you feel you were too young going into, because you need that sense of maturity. If not, it'll give it to you.
Absolutely. But what I would say, I think med school prepared us for that, because in South Africa, the medical training, what I love about it is it's grounded in immense clinical experience. We were exposed to our first patients, I think at the end of our first year of med school. And that was woven into every module that you did. So the interactions,
as it should be, right?
As it should be.
Otherwise, you're just paper-based training.
Yeah. But remember, you're 18,
so
19
young.
at the time. Your frontal lobe hasn't even fully developed yet.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with really heavy issues and, people's experiences and what this means for them. And you're expected to navigate through this and be that support for them, right? So for me, I honestly believe that every single person in this world should do some volunteering time in a hospice setting or in a palliative care setting, because it's going to fundamentally change the way you think. And what was profound for me was we had seen during that 2 years that I spent in palliative care, we had individuals coming in from all walks of life. You had underprivileged individuals who had no money at all. And then you had exceptionally wealthy individuals who came in because they all had to come in to access
through the same doors.
Through the same doors, right? And when somebody is dying and on their deathbed, nothing matters. The material stuff doesn't matter. And that was one thing that I found moved me deeply.
Yeah.
Because whether it was the individual on this side of the spectrum who had nothing compared to the individual on the other side who had everything, the car that they have, the money that they have in the bank, doesn't matter. What matters at that moment in time, and every single one of those patients that we saw, it came down to, and of course, palliative care is a holistic approach, right? You're managing the family, you're managing the individuals coming to terms with, their morbidity over time, getting the finances sorted out, that spiritual journey that happens, managing the pain, the symptoms, all of that is encompassed under the palliative care umbrella. But those moments, those final moments, every single one of them are wanting to correct the wrongs on a personal relationship front.
So interesting.
Nothing else mattered. And
did you find, because what I found interesting, because my mum and dad were not religious, they were raised in staunch religious families, and I thought it'd be interesting to see right at the end, would they switch? And they never did. They clearly were not religious people. And the palliative care nurse that helped us, what happened was I'd been going back to Ireland every 2 weeks when my mum was sick, and I had just got back. I'd only been back 2 days, and she's like the district nurse. So I only met her once, and she called me and she said, Paul, I think if you want to bring your family back, you should come back now. I said, I've just come. I'm coming again in 2 weeks. And she said, I don't think your mum's going to last 2 weeks. I said, I was just there 2 days ago. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Because, I booked flights. My wife and kids are coming. She goes, no, come now. Right. And then we went, and then my brother came from the UK, and we all saw her. And the thing is, when my mum, she was okay. But it was weird because, I had to take her to the bathroom, and she did have a nurse, but a couple of times where the nurse wasn't around. And then taking your mum to the bathroom is a very weird thing.
Yeah.
It was really weird. And then this is what came out in the 9D breath work, was the last conversation I had with her where she was lucid. She said, I was still trying to convince her she was going to get better, right? But also because I was just trying to cheer her up. And she said, where are you going on your next adventure? Because I go on a lot of solo adventure trips. I said, I want to go to Mongolia. We talked about it a little bit. And anyway, so what happens, I came back. This was 2 weeks after the family and I had been. And then I get a phone call. Sorry, I turned my phone off because I kept looking at it. And the thing is, you just don't know how long is a piece of string, how long is she going to last?
Yeah.
And I had turned my phone off because I was obsessed with looking at my flip. Like, when was mum last online?
Yes.
And then I have this dream that I'm riding a black horse in Mongolia next to 2 white horses. And it was very, very deeply spiritual. And, rarely do you remember your dreams. And I woke up, it was 3:00. And I thought, I think my mum's passed away. And as I got up, my wife, I didn't say anything. My wife went to the bathroom because I'd woken her up. She gets a phone call from my cousin who was with my mum and her husband saying, your mum's passed away. And I thought, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's freaky, right? And so then my wife and I flew back, just us, we didn't take the kids. And then I came back from the funeral and I said to my wife, I think I'm going to go to Mongolia. And I flew off the next day. I ended up falling very sick there because I think I was just emotionally wrecked. And I went and rode horses and I lived out this kind of spiritual goodbye to my mum. And then during that 9D breath work, I swear, man, I was transported, but I wasn't riding the horse. I was the horse.
Yeah.
I was next to my mum and dad. And then I don't know if you remember this bit, the man who's recorded, did he say buffaloes? Did he talk about buffaloes? Do you remember that?
I can't remember.
So I remember because that's what I thought, or that's what I thought I heard. Then I was in the Midwest of America. And then I was a buffalo stroke Native American Indian running with the buffalo. I was the buffalo and I was the Native American Indian. And it was like, this is, I've never done drugs, right, or ayahuasca or anything, but must be what it's like.
Yeah.
And I was there. That's no bullshit. I felt really connected. Anyway, before I start crying, so what happened then? So you now on this journey, what happened with you and your husband at this stage? Were there some developments?
So we ended up, we were in Singapore, for me, because as a trained medical doctor, every country has their own regulations on how you can practice, how you're able to get licensed, etc.
Yeah.
And Singapore has a very specific second schedule, is what they call it. And so depending on where you got your undergrad medical degree, that would determine whether or not you're entitled to apply for registration, licensing to be able to practice here as a practicing doctor. Unfortunately, there are no South African universities on that second schedule, despite South African medical schools sort of being in that top 100, but it is what it is. And there's also no bridging option in the sense that, if you go to the UK, you can write the PLABs and then you can work under supervision. Australia has a very similar pathway, Canada, the US, etc. But there's no pathway like that per se at the time, for Singapore. So I remember having several conversations with individuals at the, Singapore Medical Council saying, okay, well, what are my options? Because I'm a fighter. I've been a fighter since getting into med school. Well, what are my options now? What can I do?
Yeah.
And I kept getting, well, you're going to have to go back to med school. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I've kind of been there, done that. 6 years it's a long time.
Hell yeah.
And then it was more about, being a trailing spouse comes with a whole host of other things. There's a reason why you're a trailing spouse, because you're generally there to support the career progression of your husband or your wife. But that then sort of starts to put question marks around your own identity, right? Within the family, as the family grows, your own professional career, what does that mean for you? And oftentimes, the trailing spouse, we've got to make do or make the best of whatever situation we find.
Because you're compromised.
You're compromised, yes. So it took me having to then change my own mindset of, well, we're no longer on this linear path of specialization, thinking that this was exactly how my life was going to plan out, to, well, what can I do now? This is the skill set. Where am I going to go? So moving to Singapore, my work continued. I continued working as a contractor for Chevron in Indonesia. And then I did some work as a medical auditor for a medical insurance company across Southeast Asia. So a lot of my work took me out of Singapore because I wasn't by right permitted to work here.
Yeah. Madness.
And then, that brought around various experiences in different settings. What I really liked about that was you had the cultural experiences. I had it in South Africa. I got exposed to the healthcare system in Indonesia. And then fast forward a couple of years, I ended up in Kazakhstan, also working in oil and gas, but that in itself was a very different environment as well.
It's going to be beautiful, right? Harsh land though.
Yeah, and extremes, extreme temperatures. I had never felt like minus 30 degrees Celsius.
Can't even contemplate it.
I mean, I think like after you get to minus 14, it doesn't really matter how much colder it gets. You just don't feel it anymore.
And that's why the people there are so hardy. They have to be.
They have to be. They have to be. So that was a very interesting time too in my career, was getting exposure to that working environment as well.
Can you talk about that? Because why I think your message is so important on a number of different levels. One of them is about resilience and how do you pivot and adapt? Because unfortunately, most of our careers, the slogan for my podcast is, no career journey is a straight line.
And isn't that so? I mean, that's so fundamentally true. But yet, and I think now my hope is that, our children who are educated now through this system they're no longer focused on, well, this is the only way that I could go.
Yeah,
but when we were growing up, it was like you were going to be a teacher or you were going to be a lawyer, and this was the path that you were going to do.
Yeah.
And if you were a doctor, the expectation was either you're going to stay a GP or you needed to specialize, and that was the path.
It was dictated, right?
Yes. And all these other fringe things wasn't really an option for us. But when you find yourself in a situation...
Do you find, though, because I think, what I always say to people is, because a lot of careers are not by design because you didn't have those options, right? So I always try to ask people about or talk to people about is with whatever options you have, you need to be intentional, because you've got to think about, will this take me towards where I want to be in 2 steps or 3 steps? But the challenge is for a lot of us when we're you're cornered, you're not really thinking like that. You're just thinking, how do I get paid? How do I get through this now?
Yes.
I can't think about 5 years from now. I'm thinking about 5 weeks from now.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about that and then your adaptability.
So I think I choose to view it this way. every setback that I had, and this started from childhood, all the way down to, and we never spoke about that, like not making it into the hockey team in primary school, where my first hockey coach told...
Oh, you didn't?
No, they said I was too bad. And she said, I think you need to choose another sport because I don't think hockey was for you.
And how old were you?
And in my head, I was 12 at the time. And in my head, I thought, well, I'm going to prove you wrong.
I love it.
And I think that was probably like the secret driving force for like getting me into field hockey, because I was determined.
Isn't that funny? The irony is that shaped you, it made you, right? Because I had on my podcast last week, my high school, one of my very dear friends, Kanukai Jackson, who's a 2-time Commonwealth gold medalist. And when he was on the British team, I think at the age of 12, and one of the head coaches there said to his coach, I don't think this guy has got the chops for this. He just doesn't have it. And he ended up being the longest serving member of the British team. Yeah. And then when my son had a coach and he got onto the national Singapore boxing team, he said he doesn't know if his coaches believe in him. And I said, fuck your coaches, mate. You believe in yourself. Yeah. Right? And there is a time, though, because you do need people to see you. You do need people to believe in you. But those people are very rare and very special. And I always used to say to him, I see you. Right? You need to see yourself. I don't know why I was delusional. No one ever saw me. I always saw myself.
But that's powerful. You know,
I think so.
that is hugely powerful.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you can get to a place where you are rooting for yourself in the corner, then that's the strongest thing that you've got. Because then whatever anybody else tells you, you can tell them to go fuck right off, right?
100%.
Because if you've got the belief, then it might take you 100 steps to get to where you are. Yeah. And it might not be a straight road, but you're going to start making headway as long as you have that belief that's there.
It's so important. It really is. But it's so funny because I always ask people, you know, what is driving in your career today or whatever it is that you're doing. And, you know, for some people it's revenge. Sometimes it's to prove themselves. Yeah. Sometimes it's fear of loss. Sometimes it's to be the best or for people to believe. And the truth is it's a myriad of all those things. But what I find with my own kids, I don't know. I feel like I never had it, but therefore I never wanted it. I never needed people to believe in me. I always just thought, you'll come along for the ride. You'll see. It's a strange thing because I think my wife always said to my mum, how did you raise these boys to be so that basically they're overly confident? Right? It's not real. It's like they're delusional. But what we would come down and say, Mum, Dad, look, I would show our muscles, we'd be doing this. They would just ignore us. Yeah. And there were loud voices in our household. I always say there were 2.5 crazy guys in our house. I said my mum and my dad, me and my dad and my brother was half crazy, you know. But it starts with that, and I think you've got a son, I've got 3 kids. Always try to get them to believe in themselves first. You have to. So,
and that's where I'm grateful. I think that is what sport teaches you.
It really
for me.
does.
Like from a young age, if you're playing, and I would go as far as saying individual sports, but there's a component to team sports, which goes to a whole different, you know, level of what that teaches you within a team environment. Yeah. But ultimately that comes down to the trust that you have and the confidence and the belief that you have in yourself. Yeah. And it's a powerful motivator. When somebody tells you that you can't do it, do you have what it takes inside you to be like, yes, I do, and I'm going to show you. Yeah, you know,
it's funny because in particular with my son's friends that he's grown up boxing with, some of them have been his competitors, others are just guys. And win, lose, or draw, if they've had a fight, I'll always write to them. I'll send them a little note on Instagram, and because I think a lot of young men, they don't have that, right? And it's in boxing in particular, it's a very lonely place. There's nowhere to hide. If you lose, you risk being knocked out. Yeah. And the embarrassment of it, forget even going to hospital. People just, that whole psychology, and it requires a certain something. But it was funny because I loved playing football or soccer, but we had a really bad football team, right? And I didn't understand this concept. Well, why are we losing? I know I'm great. So that's why I went into solo sports. But the truth is, even if you're doing individual sports, you always have a corner team. You always have those people.
You've got that support.
You have to have
Yeah.
it. You have to have it. And you're doing a lot of the training on your own. But I think there's and in the corporate world, there's so much value to team sports.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened after that? What was next?
So where are we now?
We're
going into Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
So this opportunity presented itself. Again, oil and gas, same big organization that I'd been working as a contractor for. And I was offered this opportunity to do this 28-day rotation as a medical doctor / medical advisor in Kazakhstan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was intrigued by it because I thought, shit, 28 days on, and then you're off for 28 days, and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
There's no talk of work. You don't even get the laptop home.
Man.
Nobody contacts you. So you're only working 6 months of the year. Like, wow. And it started off the end of 2019. And at the time, back home, there was also a little bit of, my husband not wanting me to go because of the extended period of time.
Yeah.
And I could understand that, but I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. And actually, in that environment, over the years that Tengiz Chevroil in Kazakhstan had been operational, they had not had a female doctor in that position at all. And it's a very male-dominated industry in general, right?
Big time.
So I was looking at it from all of these sort of aspects. Well, it's occupational medicine. That's one of my interests as well. I love preventive healthcare. I only get to work 28 days of the month, 28 days on, 28 days off. And I'm now, this is an opportunity for me to kind of like do something different and maybe bring in that female voice, And so I ended up taking the role. Caused some issues back, at home on a personal level, but I felt this was the right decision to do and to make at the time. And so I went off for my first hitch, which was an extended hitch. So hitch is the name that we give to the time that you're working on site.
How long was it in the end?
So I think it came down to about 7 weeks, I think.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Came back home, had my off time. And then the second hitch, I was due to go back. And it was supposed to be a 28-day. So now we're into start of 2020. Got there, and it was during that second hitch that, the world got hit with COVID. And boy, what a crazy time. So what ended up happening was I was not able to leave. The borders in Singapore closed down, couldn't get back home in time. And I was still on my hitch.
Jeez.
And at the time, they had established this emergency management team to which I was called up as the medical sort of lead on the team.
Which month was this? Remember?
March,
okay.
February, March.
So you're coming out the cold.
Yeah. So that was starting to ramp up. And then my option of coming home was completely shut down because now I couldn't get in. I was a dependent pass holder. So at the time, if you remember, you could only get back into Singapore if you were a citizen or a PR.
Yeah.
And anybody else kind of fell down the list, and you had
even
to wait.
Even a DP.
Even a DP. Actually, you didn't. You were way down.
Mad.
So what ended up happening during that time was in 2020, I got stuck out in Kazakhstan for about 9 months, somewhere there. With the world changing dramatically month after month, And what that then meant was now we had to very quickly, from an organizational standpoint, pivot and reduce our footprint. Because just to give you some context, in the oil and gas field, you've got approximately about 45,000 workers on duty at any given moment in time. That's how large the operation is. And so this is, direct employees with contractors, subcontractors, all of them are staying in the same compound. And so the big mission came, well, now we need to start repatriate these individuals back home to their home countries and get down to the least amount of individuals that we need to allow for operations to continue in a safe manner, provided that if things go to shit, we're able to support them from a medical standpoint. So that became the work then for those 9 months, working on the front line, putting up quarantine facilities, organizing chartered flights, massive logistic mission to get, because we had workers from all over the globe. Some of them couldn't go back home, so we had to figure out, well, where can we put them in the interim because they can't stay here? Where do we house them? Where do we send the families? Most of the expatriate families who were residential ended up being sent home. So that then came with, you now have to swab test. Then they've got to get onto a flight. Then certain countries had their own quarantine regulations when you landed, how that was going to work. If you remember during the time, aircrafts were grounded. Nobody was flying. So we had to invoke the help of embassies. Yeah,
because you had limited medical supplies and...
Absolutely. Everything. And then not just getting people out, but then getting medical professionals in, mobilizing every nurse, every doctor that we possibly could that could help, because the national population, they were still going to stay, right?
Of course.
So we had to put infrastructure and measures in place that was there to help support, and resources that they could access. Bring in ventilators, bring in testing, supplies, medication.
Mad time. What happened then? So when you did eventually get the chance to come back, how are things then? What happened after that?
So 2020 got stuck out for 8-9 months, came back home for a little bit. I had a bit of an extended period home. And then we thought the world was going to be okay. So I ended up going back on my next hitch. Then we got hit with a Delta wave. So then I got stuck out again, because then Singapore opened up their borders a little bit and then it completely shut down again.
And your husband was here the whole time?
Yeah, and my son. Yeah.
That must have been so tough.
It was dealing with...
you must have been going mental.
It was definitely challenging and highly stressful as well, because we were working long hours on that side. And then, you've got schools were closed. My son was being homeschooled at the time. Everything was happening at home, right? And there was just pressures that came from that as well. So coming back after being stuck out again for the second time of 9 months, coming back, and then having to deal with my own, I guess, the trauma anxiety of being in that high pressured environment and having to, in 2020, sort of come face to face with my own mortality. When you're in a place and your evacuation routes are out, you're there, you're a frontline worker, you're exposed to this virus every single day. There are no guarantees. And if you get sick, you know that the ICUs and the hospitals are overwhelmed. So what's going to happen to you then?
It just must be mentally exhausting. Emotionally exhausting.
And also just, being trained in South Africa, we're trained in a resource-limited setting. So I know the theory behind how do you decide which 2 patients get a ventilator, right? Those ethical decision-making, that process that happens alongside that. So it became a real in-your-face, okay, well, if things go to shit now, I'm healthy, I think I should be okay, but there are no guarantees here. So if I do get sick and I end up having to be...
Super tough.
I can't get home. So having those hard conversations with a colleague of mine to say, I have a child at home, and I know that we only have 3 ventilators. And if I get sick, I need you to give me your word that you're going to try everything that you can to just keep me alive, that I can say goodbye. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
But then it makes it very real. And oftentimes I feel like when I talk about these experiences that we had in Kazakhstan, it's very difficult for other people to relate to it because everybody was living in their own bubble, right?
And you were away, you were isolated from your family, you know?
So isolated from the family, and that's, I think relationships in general for many people started to deteriorate over that time.
Yeah.
One, it was either because of separation, or it was because now
the opposite. You're together too much.
You're living in the house, where otherwise you would be away for 7-8 hours of the day.
I didn't think of that. I think a lot of people went through that cabin fever. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then what happened? What was next?
So had my own mental health challenges. Dealing with a whole combination of things, personal relationships deteriorating, my own mental health and anxiety coming from the experiences in Kazakhstan, and everything just kind of closing in. I consider myself to be a mental advocate, but I got to a point where I was doing everything right from a conservative standpoint, but wasn't coping at all.
Yeah.
So I had to put my pride in my pocket and go to my GP and be like, I need those meds now, But that in itself was a very hard journey. Is
that when you started therapy? Is it?
No, my therapy had started back in Kazakhstan already. I'd continued with it as well, during Kazakhstan times. But it was a combination of all of that. And then, into 2022, I ended up in a situation where, like most, I would say, we know the statistics now, 56% of marriages end in separation or divorce. And that's sort of where I found myself, which was a whole learning experience as well. And I say that because, when you are, if you just take the two scenarios of, if you're in your home environment with your family, with your own, friend support system versus being in a country where you don't have family, where you don't necessarily have the same supports, it's a very different situation. You're also dealing with the complexities of, the legal framework that you're finding yourself in. Yeah. And what that means.
And you're on a dependence pass, which means you're like, well, what happens? Am I going to be able to get another job? And
how does this play out? And this was a situation that coming here was never something that I thought about. It was never it was never part of the timeline. So it was never given any thought. And it was only when I found myself in the situation did I start to realize the implications of it. And I quickly realized that I always take myself back to, if I don't know, I need to educate myself. So I spent a lot of time educating myself on how does this work? What are the options?
You became a legal expert in...
I spent, in total, I think about 6-7 months educating myself in the library, reading primary statutes, understanding, because obviously I'm South African as well, right? So we're talking about South African law that comes into play versus Singapore law. And so for many expatriate families, that's the situation, right? You're sitting with 2 different potential jurisdictions that you need to be aware of. And these aren't topics that are front of mind when you're making these decisions to go into a new country to become a trailing spouse. Because, we all like to think of, the great experiences and whether it's driven by the career opportunity or the money that comes with that or the opportunities that is going to be presented to your children and travel, these are all really nice things to talk about. But there is a darker side. There's a darker side of all of this.
Big time.
That nobody talks about and that nobody wants to have open conversations about. And usually what I've found now, after being involved in the space and experiencing it firsthand, is that the people who have the information are the ones who end up who are going through it. You only come to know these things either because you've heard of it from a friend who's going through a certain similar situation, or you yourself have now found yourself in this, and you're like, holy shit, what now?
And it destroys so much, right? Because if you have children, I mean, in the end, I think the children are probably better off than having a couple that are together but shouldn't be together. But like I told you, one of my dear friends, it's one of my wife's best friends, Aman, who's a divorce attorney. She's recently given up law to kind of coach people through this journey. But I had her on the show, and I was asking like myths about divorce, what can you debunk? And I asked her questions like, is there a popular time where people serve divorce papers? And she said, Chinese New Year, birthdays and holidays. People are so vindictive. They will want you to deliver divorce papers on Chinese New Year when their family's around and stuff like that. I said, wow, it's kind of crazy. And, you know, the thing is, I want to write 4 books. I've started writing 4 books.
Wow.
Yeah,
nice.
it'll take time. But one of the books is How Do You Win Her Twice, referring to me and my wife. And how do you win her the first time? Actually, it should be how do you win her like 12 times? Because we've been together. So this summer is our 20th wedding anniversary. And
nice.
it depends what happens in the US. But we're going to the US with our 3 kids. And I've rented this like ranch in Jackson Hole, Wyoming with the Grand Tetons in the background. And it's just going to be the 5 of us renewing our vows.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I always tease my wife because I'm romantic, she's not. Right, but we're the complete opposite of each other in so many ways. But I always write silly messages to her. So like when I'll say, dear Mrs. Quinn, you're cordially invited to a romantic dinner with your extremely sexy, handsome husband. Please RSVP by 6 p.m. And I remember when we first met, like I took out a diary and I wrote our initials. And I said, we are now T&P Productions, Tara and Paul Productions. And I wrote our initials in the corner of each page. But I think what I've learned about most couples that I see that are going through divorce, it's for a few reasons. It's, of course, there are so many more, but empty nesters, that's one of the common traits. Early menopause.
Yes.
No one's talking about that.
Yeah.
So my wife had a hysterectomy last year. So she's going through early menopause now, and she's only 45. So we've talked about that. And I was teasing my son. I said, mate, you need to be very careful. And they're very close. You know, they have a very special bond, but I said, you don't want to chat any shit because your mum's spitting bullets.
Yeah, you got to be measured right now.
You know, be very careful.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise you're going to have to get out of the way. And then
tell them to watch The Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. You are Neo.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is we're going to this bring me to the next point about you is financial independence, because a lot of women, you know, they can earn their own money, or they realize through the divorce they can do okay. So in other words, they're not tolerating shit. And the weird thing in Singapore is this whole thing where you basically get married before you get married with an HDB flat, which is, it's kind of weird. It's so weird, right? It's alien to me. Like I always say, you should probably, why don't you live together for a couple of years and see what happens? But let's talk about financial independence as a woman, because that is so important.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I'm still in the process, still trying to find my feet. I think through all that has happened to me, I've now realized, I think early in my career, I think for most people it's like that, where it's all about the achievements and it's all about the recognition, right? And I think now it's come to, and I think it coincided sort of with my own going through perimenopause as well, where there's then that shift. Yeah, you're not going to take the bullshit anymore, but you're also trying to design a life that is aligned with your own values, and that's going to be meaningful in the long term. That's going to give you that balance.
So important.
You know, and I've reached a point where I realize it's not all about the grafting. Like, you can be selective now on how you're going to spend your time.
You have to be.
You have to be, because it's precious.
Yeah.
And tomorrow is not guaranteed for any one of us.
Yeah.
But going back to your question around, you know, the financial independence part, I think for women in my situation, where you do have, if you find yourself as a trailing spouse in a country where you don't necessarily automatically have the right to work, it becomes a challenge for you.
Tough.
And particularly if you've got children who are here, because that becomes a factor, because you can't just take them and leave. The law doesn't allow you to do that.
Yes.
And if there's no agreement on how do we see this playing out, what is the long-term plan going to be, even if we separate or you end up finalizing your divorce, how are you still able to be part of your child's life if they're still in, you know, schooling years, for example?
Yeah. I always think the lawyers are the ones that come out on the right side of things, because they that's how they make their money, which in itself is scary.
Yeah, and I think my learning was, I think at the core of how I wanted to or approach this process is with integrity, right? At the end of it, I feel. And I support a lot of women now going through this, trying to just share what I know and to help them think about the things that maybe they should be, so that they're not necessarily spending, you know, hundreds of dollars on an unnecessary consultation with a lawyer. Now, I don't ever,
It's not
I will
even hundreds,
never.
it's thousands of dollars, right?
Absolutely. I would never, I'm not a qualified lawyer, but I understand the frameworks, I understand.
And it's also the emotional rigor, right? And I would imagine going through anything like that, you can be very isolated, because, you know, if your friends, unless they're your closest friends, they may not know about it. You know, there used to be a certain level of taboo. Now, I think that's gone, but it's still difficult.
Absolutely. And so I think it's trying to navigate, again, the options that are available to you. And being very strategic in how you're going to approach this. But I think at the center of it, there's a pivotal question. At the end of this process, and not all lawyers are equal, you're going to find really good ones who actually give a shit about the family, but ultimately they're there to be paid. Whether the process ends or not, or drags out for 5 years, at the end of the day, when the deal is done, they're walking away. They're getting paid and they're walking away. And what's left is everything that is left behind.
That's the thing.
And for a lot of women, I've helped men as well, but for a lot of women, that's sort of my first conversation is, well, how do you want to do this? Because at the end of it, remember that this is a phase that you're going through. You're going to come out on the other side, and you will be okay. But how do you want that to look? Because then you've got to work backwards from there.
So interesting. So a few years ago, when I decided to formalize my career coaching business and the online platform, and then the podcast, I'd gone to an event, a business event in Miami, run by a gentleman called Patrick Bet-David. One of the pieces of homework was to create vision boards, one of your life and one things that excite you. And I always vision board, I want to do that. I thought, but listen, I paid all this one, I'm going to stay up, I'm going to do it. And actually, one of the vision boards, I tell you where I started. So I remember I always do things in quadrants. I'm a patterns person. So in the top left-hand corner, I put a picture of the kids up and put the names of some top universities, because I wanted them to have a great future. I wanted to have enough money to say, okay, if you get into these universities, I'll support you. So that was the first thing. And then in the bottom right-hand corner was a picture of me and my wife, and 50th anniversary. So I said, right, And then I put pictures of things that I thought were seminal in her career, what it is that she wanted to accomplish. And it's funny, so we did all those things. You know what the issue I had was? What was important for me.
For you, yeah.
And what I realized as I get older, of course, so my thought process has changed. It used to be the kids come first. And I think that was because when my first child, my son, was born, he was in hospital for the first 3 months. And it was a bit touch and go. So it was like, he's got to come first. But the reality is my wife comes first. You know, because the kids are going to go and do what they want.
Yeah.
But then I realized, hey, mate, you've been working for your mum and dad all those years, because I supported them from 17 onwards. And then, you know, I look after Tara's mum, her kids. And ultimately, it's not that they don't care, but the kids don't really ever ask me, how was your day, Dad? Did you have a good day? Are you happy? And I realized that if I don't do things that make me happy, I'm going to be a grumpy bastard at home. It's not going to be sustainable. So I always say to people that doing that's not selfish. You know, it's actually
it's good for
you're
everybody
preserving
else.
your life. Now, talk about the balance of corporate health and well-being versus running, you know, a busy 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 job.
Yeah.
And what you're doing now, because that's an interesting journey.
Yeah. So again, found myself in a situation of what am I going to do now, right? And I wanted to. I've always wanted to do something that is hugely impactful and meaningful, not just for me, but for whoever's sitting on the other side of me as well. And being able to educate patients, clients, resonates deep, like it's an inner passion of mine.
Yeah.
And it stems from my deep belief that if you're looking at whether it's occupational health, so in the corporate world, or you're looking at preventive healthcare and strategies, pivoting into sort of, the wellness space and health in general, if the client or patient opposite you does not understand what is happening and does not have credible information and the education around what is happening at their life in this moment, things that they need to maybe be aware of what's happening around the corner, it's very hard for them to make informed decisions if you don't have the information. And so that is what I feel is fundamental to every good medical provider-patient, medical provider-client relationship.
Yeah.
However, I'm cognizant that when it comes to GP practice, the way that the system is set up is that your GP doesn't have the time to sit with you for an hour and go deep about why did you sleep so shit last night.
They're just putting a plaster on it. It's temporary.
Most of the time, it's you're coming in for acute stuff. I want to know what is your issue right now and how do we deal with that right now, because I've got a waiting room full of people and I've got maybe 15 minutes to listen to you. And yes, you can argue that there are family medicine physicians who will take a more holistic. I'm not denying that, but I'm saying generally speaking, the GPs out there, it's a go in, get your things sorted, go out. There's not a lot of time to really talk about deeper things across
which
different
is crazy.
pillars. Yeah.
Because our health is everything.
Our health is everything, and it is so complex and integrated. You can't separate them out, right? If you're feeling stressful, I can't really make or understand that in its full context if I don't understand, well, what have you been eating? How is your exercise? What is the stress levels like at your work? How have you been sleeping? What is your relationship like with your wife at the moment? Is it highly stressful? Is there tension there? Because all of that is feeding into...
It's all inextricably linked, right?
Absolutely. And so I loved occupational, like working in the oil and gas. Great, because there it's a whole different environment. You're working in a industrial setting where you've got other types of risk factors that are playing a role, not just on the system or the operation itself, but on the individual worker. Extreme temperatures, chemical exposures, the physical labor of the work that they're doing, the psychological stress around shift work, those types of stuff. Rotational workers, the if you're sitting and you're confined to an oil rig or you're living in a compound, you're bound by the food that the cafeteria feeds you, right?
100%.
So if that's not optimal and you're not reaching your protein needs, what then?
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that part of it, of how the work, because we spend, 7 hours, 8 hours of our day in our work environment.
Yeah.
It plays a role.
Huge.
100%. And we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But then from where I am at the moment, I work in a health optimization space at Matter. I'm the director of operations and I work as a health coach as well. And what I really like about working in this health coach environment is I'm now sort of at the center of kind of pulling in the information from different providers within this ecosystem around the individual, if you will.
Yeah.
So that could be something like maybe it's your psychologist or it's your personal trainer or it's your GP, or maybe you've had to go and see a specialist, right? But there's no one person that's connecting all of these for you. And that's hugely powerful for patients, clients, individuals to make sense of what's going on, right? I mean, in the corporate world, you do these 360 performance.
On at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But no one's. What I find so interesting is if you think if large corporates actually had someone like you doing this to optimize, let's just say they only increase the optimization of every employee mentally, physically, spiritually by 10%. What would it mean to their P&L?
Yeah.
That's the future.
Yeah.
Right. No one wants to do it because it costs more money, but actually you're going to make a lot more money in the process.
And we're slowly starting. I mean, what we saw happening in the corporate space after COVID, because that brought a real spotlight on, your mental health and your ability to function at work is very closely linked.
Yeah.
We've known that for a while, but COVID really highlighted that.
Yeah.
And we are seeing certain organizations now starting to be a little bit more proactive. And I think it's got to go more than just a wellness program that you run every 6 months, right? Where you're telling people to eat right, etc. It's got to be embedded in the culture of the organization.
I love that.
All the way from leadership setting the example of how to do things right and protecting the cognitive load of the employees, right? And they're not exempted from it either because they also suffer from mental health issues.
What I find really interesting is some of the top leaders that I work with, they are very health conscious. But for whatever reason, maybe it's because, the people at the highest level, they're not driving this down because, you could literally increase your P&L to the bottom line by changing that. Just think about it. If you're an athlete, you're an astronaut, you're a pilot, whatever it is, you've got to be ready to go. So it's interesting. So tell me about, so when I'm coming to spend half a day with you, I was just saying to my wife, I think I need to get into better shape when I go because it's like, she goes, well, tell her you'll be there in 6 months. But tell me about, so you've got a hyperbaric chamber, or go through the process.
Okay, so within this health optimization space, the philosophy around it is centered in you are you, and there are certain things that in this particular season of life is going to matter to you.
Yeah.
And for a 30-year-old, that's different to somebody who's in their mid-40s, to somebody who's maybe in their mid-50s, for example.
For sure.
So the idea around having these modalities, science-informed therapies that we offer, health coaching at the center of it, medical partners that we work with, is to first of all understand, what matters to you now? What are you having challenges with right now? What matters to you, and how can what we've built support you in trying to raise your baseline, and over time build capacity for you to be able to function
Brilliant.
as you age. Now, for many 20, 30-year-olds, you know, that's sort of like the peak years. You know, our hormones are at its highest level, where
Yeah.
we feel great. If you go to the gym and you work out and you're doing the right things right,
Yeah.
you're going to start seeing the results. But as we age, our body is no longer in that state, and we have to respect that. And so we have to be, again, strategic on how we approach this.
Big time.
And the effort that we put into it. I always make the example, you know, you probably have life insurance.
Yeah.
You have medical insurance. But why do you have life insurance? Why do you take out accident insurance? You take it out for the rainy day.
Yeah.
But we know that aging, none of us are beating it. We're all going to go through it.
No one beats
But
Father Time.
no one's putting the investment
No.
into this health. But we're very prepared to be reactive when the shit hits the fan.
You know what it is. I've thought about this because two of the guys here, they're here today. Gautam's one of them. He smokes, and I said, look, I can't ask you to do this. I'm your colleague, right? But I think you should give up smoking. And I said, come for me, go for some walks. And he walks a lot every day. And I said, yeah, but stop the smoking, right? And you know, do some push-ups and do this, that, and the other. Because the thing is, so for example, I've got more energy than anyone that works for me, and they're all younger than me. I mean, not even by a little bit, a country mile. And you know, I'm actually in my worst shape right now because I had a double surgery a while back, and I was struggling to recover from it. And it's just I turned 50 next September, and the reality is that when I look at food, not even eat it, I put weight on. Right. And then it's that thing, because I don't know about you. So if I'm depressed or I'm upset, I go to food and I eat the shit out of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Crisps, chocolates, cake, whatever, ice cream, right? You name it. But I just said, look, the reality is if you want to be performing and you want to achieve what you want to achieve in the next 10 years, your health is central. So going back to these guys, they smoke because they're young. They're not thinking about their mortality.
Yeah.
But they can't see it. They're already don't have the energy that they should have. They're young.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing about, you know, preventive health.
Yeah.
Is we live in a world where we're expecting instant results.
That's the thing.
People don't have the patience anymore to wait it out. You know, you're swallowing a pill hoping that it's going to bring you some magic cure tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this is the world we live in because our food's delivered in 5-10 minutes. I mean, I get frustrated sometimes when the taxi says it's going to be there in 5 minutes and now he's stuck in traffic and I'm like, shit, why isn't he here? It's part of our lives now.
Mad.
But the downside to that is that from that, the strategies of what you need to do to improve your health, build that capacity so that you're aging better, takes time. And it takes discipline and consistency,
time.
right?
Big time.
But also building it into your life. And that's why I'm not a big fan of like generic, this is a one size fits all. It cannot be.
It cannot be.
We are all individuals. We all experience things differently. And so that is the approach that we have to take.
So how detailed are you doing? Are you doing things as far as blood work, or do you send people off for that?
So we've got the health coaching part, we have the therapies, the medical providers that we work with can do blood panels as well.
Okay.
And so depending on, we've got 3 main programs that we focus on. One is your medical fat loss, and we've deliberately chosen that path because GLP-1s are now everywhere. You know, almost all the celebrities are on it. You see it everywhere. It's all over social media, and people are taking it as, okay, does it work? Yes, it works. But there are certain things that you need to be aware of. Are you going to see results? Yes, you are going to receive results, but it's going to come at a cost. And that cost is oftentimes you're going to lose your muscle.
Yeah.
And your muscle is your anabolic armor. That is what is going to protect you as
I've not heard it presented
age.
that way, for sure.
And so we chose that particular program because we know that people who go on the GLP-1s, they lose the weight.
Yeah.
And then they need to get off it at some point. And when they start to wean off it and they haven't built the habits and they haven't changed their lifestyle to a point that is sustainable, they're going to put the weight back on. And oftentimes it comes back faster than it
Big time.
took to get off, right? So the idea around that program is to really educate you, number one, on what you should be thinking about and working with you during that process to build the habits that will be sustainable so that you can preserve your muscle, so that you can continue doing strength-based training to build your muscle capacity, that you can understand nutrition. Because remember, these drugs are turning off the hunger signals. But your body can only function for so long without getting appropriate macro and micronutrients. So at some point it's going to crash. And if you don't have the right tools and information, you can't make good decisions that's going to benefit you in the long term. So that's the one program. The other one is hormone optimization. There we're talking about middle-aged men and women.
TRT, is it?
Yeah. So the testosterone for men, you're talking about...
Do you know, I'll tell you a funny story. So when I had some blood work taken about a year and a bit ago, I said to the doctor, how's my testosterone? He goes, I didn't check for it. I said, why? I thought we were doing a full blood work. He goes, why is it low? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, are you not in your libido? And I said to him, well, sometimes I have to smack it in the morning. And he said, you smack your penis? Like, he said it very serious, Singaporean. I said, no, mate, it was a joke, it was figurative. I just said, listen, it doesn't work like it used to. He goes, well, I can get you some Viagra and Cialis. I said, I'm not quite there yet. And my wife will probably run away from me. But what was interesting, he just didn't even want to talk about it. You know?
And I think that is why this particular space is so interesting right now. Is because there's a lot of, through social media, discussion happening. The men's health is certainly picking up. But right now, you know, the trending conversations within the women's health space is perimenopause, menopause. But to go back to, you know, as a doctor, for many of us who were trained in the past, we spent very little time on this particular phase of life.
It's the most overlooked part.
How do you treat it? How do you manage it? What should we be aware of, right? Testosterone was a thing of, well, that's only something that men have. And it's because, you know, one, it drives libido, and two, it helps you stay all muscular. Yes, it does, but it has a way more powerful, I mean, there's other functions that it has. And also, testosterone is made in every single female body as well. And there's a role that it plays. And we're now living in a time where we are living for so much longer. Thank you to our wonderful advances in medical therapies. And the years that we are spending in the corporate world being productive is a chunk on the side.
But you know what's crazy is that in terms of employment law, in terms of retirement ages, they haven't changed, and it doesn't make any sense. Because I'll give an example. A lot of retirement ages, the women are meant to retire earlier than the men. I said, that doesn't make sense because women live longer than men. I said, if anything, women should be marrying younger men to keep up with them, if you think about it, right? Because it's always the man that dies first. And then the woman's got another 20 years, right? And so that doesn't make any sense. And then the thing I find really interesting about this whole discussion about as you get older, everyone's embarrassed to talk about it. Like, why? It's just natural, right? So, for example, now there's this thing where men are regularly getting their hair. They're going to Turkey or wherever it is
to get transplants.
And do you know how many people have said to me, "Have you ever considered a transplant?" And I said, well, you know, I never looked that good with hair. I think I look pretty good without hair. And that's okay if that's important to you and you want to go and spend that money, right? But I said I was a sexy motherfucker then and I'm sexy
and
motherfucker now. I'm not going to
Yeah.
change that. But what's interesting is no one would have talked about it. It wasn't even a thing. And I just got back from Dubai, and this is, it's so weird. These are the women in Dubai. Not all the women, but a lot of the women. They got the lips out here.
The Daisy Duck lips.
It's bananas. And I was just thinking, we're living in this really crazy world. But just in terms of, you know, there are all these strength calculators if you go online, and then I just say, just go and do a dead hang, right? And you'll realize that where if you can get to a minute, you'd be doing really well. And people don't realize, because we don't have to do anything functional anymore. And most of us couldn't even run for the bus. I was just saying, so you have a test. Can you run for the bus without passing out, having a heart attack?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? What's the third?
And then the third one is sort of a lifestyle program.
Okay.
That's more for individuals with, burnout.
Yeah. It's a lot,
who are not. So you could, for some men, if you're middle aged, there's an overlap. And so these programs incorporate nutrition, movement, education, health coaching, blood work.
Well, what you guys are doing is so unique. It's so dynamic, cutting edge. So you have a ice cold plunge.
So we've got
on site.
So at Holland Village, we have 2 private contrast suites. In each contrast suite, there is a hybrid sauna. So you have a traditional sauna setting as well as infrared.
Okay.
And then you've got a cold plunge and then a private shower. So that space is for you with one other person. Then we've got a red light therapy bed. We have a hyperbaric oxygen therapy
they're saying red
chamber.
light therapy helps with your eyesight now. I want to start looking into that.
So there I would say that the evidence...
It's not there, it's new, right?
Correct. And with the red light therapy for all our clients, you're putting on protective...
Mask on your eyesight.
Protective glasses to protect your eyes from that. Do we have some clients who will close their eyes because they want the red light to kind of penetrate the upper eyelids?
Yeah.
And we'll tell them, don't look into the light for extended periods of time.
Of course.
So that evidence is starting to emerge, but nothing concrete
and
yet.
Tell everyone about the hyperbaric chamber, because this is something that most people aren't familiar with.
Yeah. So I'm a certified hyperbaric safety director, and I manage the chamber at Mata.
So if I piss you off, you're going to mess me up. Yeah.
Just keep you in.
See you tomorrow, Paul.
The hyperbaric oxygen therapy has been around for decades in medicine, predominantly used for decompression sickness. So it's, and for diabetic patients, the medical chambers were used to help with wound healing as well. So within medicine, the chambers have been around for a very long time. What has happened now is it's shifted because of the benefits that providing high concentrations of oxygen in a pressurized environment can provide to the individual from a deeper healing standpoint. So it's moved into, I would say, the wellness space, where it's used for various reasons as well. You've always got the medical indications of when you can use hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but when we're looking at a healthy individual, for example, depending again on phase of life, what's happening, if you're sick, if there's issues with energy, or maybe you're just high functioning and constantly, you're on this nervous system overdrive track, or you fly a lot, maybe you're a busy exec and you're flying between different time zones every twice a week, for example, or something like that. You suffer from jet lag, but you need to come home and you need to be productive, right?
Yeah.
The hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, the HBOT, can help with those things.
What's the average length of time people are going into it
So
for?
you're in the chamber for about minimum 60 minutes.
Wow.
Our session times are 60. We develop the protocol so we can customize it as well. So we have clients who have done 90-minute sessions. But you're in the chamber for 60. Your session time is 90 minutes, and that allows us to do the checks before you go into the same. Because for me, also coming from working in oil and gas, it was always safety first.
Yeah.
There's always time to do it right, or you don't do it at all.
Yeah.
So for me, safety is a big thing.
Well, we have all those deep sea divers as well, and the bends and that whole decompression. It's life or death, right?
Yeah. And so, and the chamber itself is a specialized piece of machinery that needs to be respected.
Yeah.
And, it's I think the misconception that a lot of people have is you're seeing a lot of chambers in the market right now, that are putting out all these claims around, well, it can do this and it can do that and it's great for this. And yes, generically speaking, it is. That's what the chambers can do because it uses high oxygen concentrations in a pressurized environment. And there are different pressures that you can do your dive at. But I'm finding that people who are going to social media, who are getting their information from influencers, etc., who aren't necessarily educated in this space,
Can be mismanaged, misused, right?
are saying, okay, well, yeah, I'm going into this chamber and I'm getting oxygen through this little pipe that's over here, and it's just flowing out the oxygen in this chamber, and I'm now getting close to 100% oxygen. No, you're not, because that oxygen that's coming through, I mean, it's being dispersed into the chamber environment. That's the first thing, which could potentially increases the oxygen concentration in the ambient air, could potentially become a fire hazard as well. And you're in a pressurized environment, so you have to respect the laws of physics. One, we're using the laws of physics to manipulate the environment to bring you the benefits of the oxygen.
You need to have someone who knows what they're doing, basically.
Exactly.
Right?
And you need to understand the differences as well.
Wow.
So for me, it was very important that when Matter started out, I was advocating for the chamber.
Yeah.
And I said, look, there's huge benefit that an HBOT can bring to people from all spheres of life, whether you're coming in from an post-orthopedic surgery and you're recovering from a shoulder surgery, or you've had plastic surgery done, or the orthopedic surgeons are actually, and the plastic surgeons are pretty proactive in encouraging their patients to go and find a hyperbaric oxygen chamber because they know that it works with helping speed up the recovery time and reducing the swelling, things like that. But then from a wellness perspective, you're wanting to make sure that, one, you're in a place, they know what they're doing, and that the chamber is giving you what you need to be able to get the benefits that it's marketed for, or that they're claiming, right?
What are the average types of clientele that you guys have? What's the demographic? Because it costs money, right?
It does. I am, hoping that at some point, being able to hyperbaric oxygen therapy within this space is going to be something that medical insurances will take note of because of the benefits that it's going to bring. Eventually, but we're not there yet. In the hospital settings, those can definitely be. But in terms of the clients, we're seeing a range of clients. We've got athletes who are coming in. And it's interesting because if you follow the sports just around the world, like all your top Premier League football clubs at the moment have got hyperbaric chambers installed in their training facilities.
Yeah, the game's changed.
The game's changed, right? So you've got your athletes that are coming in as part of not just performance, but recovery as well.
Recovery is everything.
And as you age, we know the body just doesn't repair as it used to when it was younger. So we have to take that into consideration as well. Then we've got people who have come in who are recovering from surgical procedures, who are using the hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber as a means to speed up their recovery, help to reduce inflammation, and reduce possible infections later on, swelling, etc. Then we've got individuals who are high performers. We've got some CEOs that are coming in. And again, it's a combination of, I have this really highly stressful job. I have to oftentimes take meetings late at night. My sleep is fragmented. I'm starting to notice
all the issues I have.
I'm starting to notice some cognitive decline, which happens with age anyways. and I'm wanting something to help me perform better within my work, my professional life.
They get it. They understand it.
They get it, right? Yeah. So we've got those individuals, and then we've got clients who travel frequently.
Yeah.
They may be supporting or have multiple businesses, and Singapore has become a haven for certain corporates.
Yeah.
A lot of their HQs are here.
Yes.
And so their executives are flying all over the world. And that comes at a cost.
Yeah, of
You're
course.
not eating properly when you're doing long haul flights. Your circadian rhythm is messed up. Oftentimes you don't have the time to get into the gym to exercise as you would in a normal routine.
Yeah.
The flying itself poses additional stresses on the body.
Yeah.
Your digestive system is messed up. So the hyperbaric chamber is used as a means to help the body quickly get back into the rhythm.
People don't think about it, like when you get older, like deep vein thrombosis, getting off flights and whatnot. These are very serious issues.
From the immobility
Yeah.
standpoint. And that comes down to hydration, the lack of movement, all of that, but also because of the fluid movements, the fluid shifts that happens during long haul flights.
Yeah.
So that's why the therapy is actually the protocol that we have for jet lag addresses those issues, from circadian rhythm management to flooding the body with oxygen so we can kind of get you back on.
It's fascinating.
And then get you into the infrared sauna so that you have the vasodilation so that we can start to move that fluid that has now been...
Do you go into the ice cold baths? Do you like plunging or not really?
So I'll tell you, my plunging journey is still at the beginning. I have a very strong sympathetic response to cold.
I flipping hate it. So if I'm doing it, you have to do it with me. Don't back out now, girl.
So I've
never done it.
I say, oh, you haven't?
No,
okay, so
I
then
put my foot in, I'm like, no, that's not for me.
And this is the information, so the education part. Because if you are, my concern around when you're having, you've got facilities these days that are communal.
Yes.
And going into the sauna and doing a cold plunge is talked about because we have all these influencers talking about it. But there's nuances to doing it. And what you need to understand is everything that you're doing within, let's say, these therapeutic modalities are signals to your body. And you have to understand the signal because whatever you're signaling, your body is going to respond based on physiology. And so jumping into a cold plunge out of the blue without preparing for it, without knowing what to do, your body is going to take that as a massive sympathetic stressor.
Yeah.
And you might end up doing more harm than good. And for most people who just take the dive, they come out of it saying, fuck, I hated that. I don't ever want to do that. And then they put off cold plunge.
Yeah.
And cold plunge is a hugely powerful modality to help build up the capacity in your nervous system. Because what it does is we use it as a training. And a lot of the top high performers will use cold plunge not to get the muscle benefits, because their muscles are achy. They use it to train their nervous system.
Yes.
Because when you get into the cold plunge, instinctively when your body hits that level of cold, you're going to want to hold your breath.
Yeah.
And your mind is just telling you, get me the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
But when your mind is telling you that, you have got to train it to start breathing through it. And then you get to a place where you've now trained your brain and your nervous system to be able to identify that threat and be like, okay, wait, I can manage this, I can do it. And you're breathing through it, and then your body starts to settle. And that's how you build the resilience from the psychological benefits and mental benefits of cold plunging.
Yeah.
So it's hugely powerful, but it has to be...
You have to build up to it.
Yes.
Good.
We will never put you into... So I always say, if this is your first time and you're doing a contrast suite, start off in the sauna.
Yeah.
And when you're sequencing it, so you're spending 15 minutes or 20 minutes in the sauna and you get out go and do a cold shower
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
So that you're priming and you're getting your body used to that. And whether that takes you 2 or 3 sessions, you build up from there.
Yeah.
And when you get into the cold plunge, you start maybe with your foot.
Yeah.
You know, you go up to your ankle
You
and
build.
you put it in for maybe 30 seconds. And after that, you're feeling, okay, this is too much for me now.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can keep it in there for a minute.
Yeah.
And you build up from your ankles to your knees down to, you know, your waist. And then you slowly submerge down to your neck. But it's never just a go straight in and take the plunge.
I'm glad I've told. Well, listen, I'm really looking forward to it. Dr. Shireen, it has been a pleasure. You've had such a colourful story, and you're only just getting started. you're just getting going, right? Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and I'm so excited to. Yeah, we'll do some protocols. And
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. You know, the one thing my observation of you is you're a great storyteller, but you're great at listening. You're very connected when we're talking. And that not a lot of people are. Have you noticed when you meet people, quite often they can't hold eye contact. Sometimes you feel that you've lost them and they've gone off to space. But you're really deeply connected.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate that.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you for having me.
My pleasure.